Tell me straight out, I call on you. Imagine that you are building the edifices of human destiny with the object of making them happy in the finale. But in the process, you had to inevitably torture just one tiny little creature. That same tiny little creature beating her chest and raise your edifices on her unrequited tears. Would you be the architect on those conditions? Tell me the truth. Ivant Alyosha in the Brothers Karamazov. Good morning. See off in the distance there, that church is the Church of St. Stephen and St. Tathan, right here in Caerwent. About 50 miles east of Cardiff and about 10 miles west of Chepstow. We'll be going to Chepstow after here because that contains the oldest castle in all of Wales. And what we're standing in front of right here is considered to be the best remains of Roman occupation. This was a group of people called the Silures who came through here and built this this entire town. Was a Roman fortification, and it was built in 75 AD. And when Time Team came here along with the BBC, they dug all this up, excavated this, tracked exactly where everything was. This was actually a market. What we're looking at here was the market, because it was a very strategically located between, well, the south of England, between London and Cardiff and the south coast of Wales. So it had a great thoroughfare coming through. So it was a market town essentially, and there was more to see other than just this in Caerwent, and we're going to go down and have a look at more of it shortly. But when they dug this up, they discovered that this was part of the market. Research shows that this was the facade of the building, and from these two rooms here, animal products were being sold. Yeah, chicken, beef, pig, all sorts of animals. So it's essentially a butcher shop. And so once upon a time, there would have been a door right here. There must have been some form of step heading over here. Surely you can't be contained within this room itself. This is an artist's rendition of what we're looking at, which would place us, because like we say, it was a hustling, bustling community during Roman times. We would be standing right here. There's a step in the building here that comes out, and that is right here. Yep. Stepping out and back in. So this side was market, and this side, up that end, was residential. But the marvellous thing about this site is it continued all the way up until the Middle Ages. It continued being used all the way up until the Middle Ages, as opposed to a lot of other Roman sites in the United Kingdom where there was a mass exodus in 410 AD after Alaric and the Visigoths had sacked Rome. It wasn't the official fall of Rome, but it was a major sacking which brought about the mass exodus from Great Britain, that wasn't even called Great Britain at the time, but Britannia. And they should have seen that coming, because Alaric and the Visigoths had made 3 attempts in the decade leading up to that. Like we say, it was an entire community. It was essentially a gated community. As you can see from here, we are down here in the marketplace, the original marketplace. We have West Gate, North Gate, East Gate and South Gate, and the Castle Mound, which is a great viewing point to keep an eye out all over the valley here.
There's your church too.
Yes, and there is our church. So there was a temple up here. We're going to head up there in a moment and have a look at the remains. Yep. And it backs onto Caerwent House. We're about 250 metres down the road from the old market, and this is the Roman Temple Mound. It's a very, very clear outline of where the temple used to stand, and by placing gravel in here, they've helped us to understand. So it's almost suggestive that this was a cloister on either side, and that the main temple was in the middle at the rear there. So this location here was the main entrance to the temple. What denomination they worshipped here is not, well, it was a form of Roman Catholicism, no doubt, but it's not completely clear. Now this is the temenos, like I was saying, it's like a, temenos means an area in the Roman language. It means an area that's cut off for other uses. It's difficult to explain because I've never tried to explain it. And the main temple was in here, which had an entrance coming through here. This was an ambulatory, which is just another word for an aisle, but that's what they call them in these buildings. And this was the main temple. So magnificently well defined. You can jump onto Google Earth. I'll put a link up for the exact coordinates. You can jump onto Google Earth and have a look at this from above. It's absolutely amazing. We are here on the the east gate, and we're going to try and find some elevation because there was a temple down here outside the town. Now, the other temple we visited was here, and then earlier on the market was up here. Now, they had double gates at the east and west, but single gates at the north and south, because coming from London to Cardiff was east to west. Here at the east gate, I love the etymology of these things, to break it down. Caerwent Road. Hill is Welsh for road. It's synonymous to strand. Caer meaning fortress, which we spoke about earlier, and Vent from the Venti Cilirum, the name of the area. So road, fort, the name of the area, Caerwent Road. Yeah, it's a revolving door, isn't it? You unhitch that and it swings, and it's got a counterbalance that runs through a couple of pulleys, so that stone helps it turn. Just brilliant. Wonder if it's operational, Mar. Just give that a lift. Oh yeah. Yeah, let it go of its own volition. Oh, all right. See if it works. Oh, it might be just a little bit of. Just grabs here. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. I thought this was very interesting that this stone here, his neighbour passed in 1886, so this one's probably a similar year. But it's very interesting that the dirt has come to settle within the letters and the moss has grown from that. You can actually differentiate a couple of these letters here based on the moss growing out of there. Yeah, good morning. Good morning again, and there's a castle behind me. Chepstow Castle, the oldest post-Roman construction in Wales. This castle was built in 1066 and it was referenced in the Domesday Book in 1088. Remember the Domesday Book? That was misleading because it wasn't about a doomsday. It was just a stock take by William the Conqueror about what he owned in Great Britain. And this was built in Ghent, and it was used to put down Ghent. And a number of very famous people over the years have lived here, including William Marshall. We're going back to the mid 12th century. William Marshall. Remember, he was a baron and a knight, and he was called by Archbishop of Canterbury Stephen Langton. He was referenced as the greatest knight that ever lived. Remember Stephen Langton? He was a major player in the siege of Rochester Castle, because he was the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time that King John had been forced to sign the Magna Carta. So a couple of rather important individuals in history have owned this castle. She's a beauty. She's big. She's imposing. Interestingly, she's not at the elevation that you think, where you expect a lot of castles to be. We're actually quite low down in a bit of a valley here. But let's go inside and have a look. Okay, so we're inside, and how cool is this? This is the old kitchen, and it's magnificently well preserved, this castle, given its age. This is a couple of ovens, and this would have been a storage for the kitchen. Or cellar, yeah. An above ground cellar, and there's another one out here. Well, this is absolutely amazing. This is the old door that was originally on the front of the castle. Until 1962, they were at the front gate, and they were copied. So there's an exact replica of the gates now, and these doors were bought in here. Their age was recently tested by dendrochronology, which is tree ring dating, and they were found to have been no later than 1190s. This surprising early date makes these the oldest castle doors in Europe. And you can see how they were held together with bolts. These are nearly 1,000. This is nearly 1,000 years old, which means the trees it came from would have been considerably older. For nearly 1,000 years, this is how we access this castle. You had your little door here. That one's locked closed.
Look at this one at the top.
Yes, and well, that would have hinged. I don't know. I can't. There's a block of wood in there. If that wood comes out, this lifts up. It may have been a locking mechanism for a bigger part of the door, because it's sectional. Here's another section here. I love this lattice weaving here. This is amazing. And some pretty sharp edges on there. That I could punch my skin on that quite easily. That one. And have a look at this hinge, the wear on it. Look at that. Are we able to get down low and have a look up underneath? Because there's a huge amount of wear under here.
Yes.
And I'm guessing it was one of 3 hinges. There's another one up the top that's in rather good condition, and there is not one down the bottom. It's missing. And there's more hinges over this side. There's one up the top, because it's amazing. If my camera person can move back a little bit and get a bigger view of this, I think there's a door here. There's a separate door here.
Yes.
All this lattice work is in a separate door. And I think that you could also open this section down, this door and this door.
The whole top, that opened the whole lot. Yep.
Like it was sectional. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Depend on who's coming in for the day.
Dozens of different variations on what you do. You could probably even open the top.
Yeah, it does.
And some breeze come through.
Yeah, look at it. Yeah.
While maintaining security.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see where it does.
Wow, it's fantastic that it's now in here and out of the weather, and it can last forever and be appreciated. There's some metal strapping on the back here that's worn rather thin as well. As we appreciate this door, I'm looking around on the ground, and I've found this. This is a little bit of timber from it. Do you give it to the information centre, or is it, is it debris? Look, a little splinter came off it. It's always good to discover something by sheer accident, like this. Can you see the lintel? There would have been a doorway there once upon a time. When you come in, when I came in, I'm trying to work out how you get to that second floor, and then it occurred to me that this is originally a stairwell, like we keep climbing, which always runs clockwise. So this would have been at one stage a step, and the pillar that ran up the middle of the room would have stood right about here. There really is two sections to this castle. This is the higher bailey, and as we pass through from the lower section, we've come across some magnificent doors again. I don't know if these ones have been aged, but there's no reason for us to think that they weren't the same age as the ones that were brought in from the front of the castle. So here we are inside the Great Tower, which is the first part of this castle to be built, and it certainly is a great tower. Look at the sheer size of this. The camera's not doing it justice, but you can see where the floors used to lie, you can see where the windows were, you can see fireplaces, you can see everything. You can see what the building would have looked like at one stage. The Great Tower here would have been extremely well decorated. You can see all the ornate work around these windows. Also, you can see where a very large archway would have spanned across the middle of the tower. Here's the remains of that arch, Roman arch. And in order to get a scale of the sheer height of this, there is a tiny old lady. Another fine example of staircases that haven't stood the test of time. You can see the remnants of it there circling around and up. Here we are at one of the highest parts of Chepstow Castle, and apparently paintings had been done up here from this viewing point by J.M.W. Turner. He's on the British £20 note, and he was an artist who did period paintings with watercolours. He did from the Romantic period. It's interesting to visualise this as a job site, because you're building on the stone and then or the rock. You're building on the rock and you're using your stone, and trying to imagine hundreds of men here mixing up plaster or cement and bonding all these rocks together, and eating lobster every day for lunch. Lobster's only been expensive in the last 150 years. Right in the middle of the castle here, you've got what used to be Tudor apartments, and we would have been inside a building at one stage. Here's fireplaces for the lower floor and a fireplace for the upper, and a doorway would have once stood leading into the tower and out into, well, a hall that would have been above us as we stand. Wonder what happened on this day in history. Mum is up at the front of the bus at the moment, having a good time all by herself. And so I am responsible for today's On This Day in History. And on this day in history, the 22nd of December 1849, the execution by the Russian writer Fyodor Dostoevsky was called off at the last moment. And fortunately it was, because it wasn't until 1880 that he gave us his best work, his classic, The Brothers Karamazov. And given that we've been doing On This Day in History, probably a good chance to have a little bit of a fun fact. This is the 356th day of the year under the Gregorian calendar. Prior to the Gregorian calendar, we had the Julian calendar. And in 1585, we dropped the days October 6th through to October 15th. So we dropped 10 days in order to fix the alignment of the calendar, because prior to that we had 365 days and a quarter each year. In fact, we had 365.2425 days per year. It was an extra 5 hours, 48 minutes and 46 seconds. And inevitably those 12 minutes per year added up. So it got adjusted with the Gregorian calendar, and in order to realign it, we had to drop 10 days out of history. So there are 10 days that never existed.